All right, guys, let's go ahead and get started. Then anybody else that wants to pop in, they'll be jumping in the middle of it. If you can, if you guys are showing me your camera, give me a thumbs up if you hear now that I have the microphone on. Looks like we're good. Okay. So we're talking about squatting today, obviously. Just as like a preface, I love squatting. If you said I could only do one movement for the rest of my life and that was it, I would probably choose squatting because I think it's the funnest, first of all. And then also, obviously your legs get strong, upper body gets strong. It's good for core strength. So it's just a fun movement. I really enjoy it. So hopefully you guys too. We'll be talking about squatting in general, probably more biased towards the back squat, particularly the high bar back squat. Not that, a low bar is that much different. It just changes a little bit of what we're working on. But if you guys don't have a barbell at home, that's totally fine because these are principles that apply to an air squat. They apply to a goblet squat, really just general squatting principles. So the first thing we're going to kind of get started with today, let me see if I can lower this. If you guys have space, that would be perfect. I'll be doing a lot of moving the camera around, so just kind of bear with me with that. I'll do it up on this table, even though it's going to be pretty high up. Okay, so all I want you guys to do is find some space, and we're going to just do a little squat test. So we're going to spend, if we can, 60 seconds in the bottom of our squat position. Now, having said that, if you're like, hey, I got a bad knee, I got a bad ankle, my back's hurting, that's fine. You can sit this out, but we're going to use this as somewhat of a diagnostic. Now, there's some people that will try to go, hey, I want you to go 10 minutes. I want you to go forever on this thing. We're just going to try to go 60 seconds here. If even, and just try to build up and kind of see what we're feeling here. So like I said, I'm going to be up on this table here. So you can start however you want. And I just want you to get to the bottom of your squat. So we're just going to be in this position here. Okay. If you can, try not to rest your arms on anything. Preferably your arms are just here. Probably wouldn't put them on your knees too much. We just don't want to give ourselves postural support either. So we're just hanging out here, just in the bottom of our squat. And if you can if you've never squatted before and this is your first time or you're not sure about technique, maybe try to emulate what I'm doing, sitting as deep as I can. And if you can't go as deep as me, that's totally fine. Go to what your tolerance is. Trying to keep the knees relatively out. You don't have to go insanely wide, but knees somewhat outside of our feet. And now that we've been here for maybe 15, 20 seconds, I want you to start noticing, what am I feeling? And this is the diagnostic part of it. I'm in the bottom of my squat position. This is probably as deep as I can get. Am I feeling it tight in my shins? That's kind of where I feel it here. I feel it in the front here. We call this our peroneal muscles, our anterior tibialis. Feel it right in the front of my shin. That's where I'm feeling it. And I want you to note, where do you feel it? Do your hips feel tight? Is your back hurting? Is it hard to stay upright? Do you feel like you're hunched over here? Are you having a hard time keeping your knees out? They want to kind of track in like this. Are my feet not stable? Can I not keep my feet flat on the ground? Am I coming up on my heels like this? I want you guys to pay attention here. We're going to go another 10 seconds. And then the other thing is too, is am I breathing, right? So if I'm not breathing, that means I'm trying to create artificial stability by holding my breath. So that's another thing to consider. Okay, you guys can come on out of that. So as I was saying, the whole objective of that is not for you guys to be on video and see who has a good squat versus a bad squat, because some of you guys have better squats than I do. The objective there is just to diagnose, where am I feeling tight? Where am I feeling restrictions? Am I feeling pain places? Am I having issues along those lines? And that's what we're going to kind of get into next. Everybody's anatomy is different. And what I mean by that is the way your hips are built, the way your ankle is built, the way your pelvis structure, your low back, that's different for all of us. So our squatting position needs to be very nuanced and individualized based on our anatomy. Now, a lot of us have learned and have been taught, or maybe even coached, that a perfect squat is with, you can't see my feet, but my feet straight, and then my knees flaring out, in that really tight boxed in position with full depth, going way past hip crease, below parallel. And that's all well and good. And that's an objective we can work towards, but it doesn't mean that we have to force that position. So if you can't do that right now, that's totally fine. And I would liken this to, if you guys played basketball before, if you've hardly ever shot a basketball, but you want to be the greatest 3-point shooter of all time, the smart thing would not be to just go to the 3-point line and just hammer 3-point shots. Okay. You'd want to start close. And then as you build up some confidence, as you develop your skill, as you learn your technique and you get stronger and you get better at it, then you slowly work your way out. Same thing with the squat. If you're not having, if you're having problems in the bottom squat position, in that really tight, narrow position, widen things out. Maybe that means flaring your feet a little bit. Maybe it means restricting your depth. All these things we want to work on because we're not there yet. And the time to improve it isn't always just squatting. There's little things we can do to fix that. So that's why that's important. Now, how do we figure out what's a good squatting position for me based on my anatomy? We're going to go through that now. So we're going to be, and again, I'm up on this table to demonstrate here. We're going to be in this hands and knees position. We call it quadruped. So if you guys want to do it with me, great. And I'm going to have you guys start with everything squared up. So my knees are in line with my shoulders. We would call this kind of a narrow position. If we were squatting, this would be narrow. So if you took my body and you rolled me and you stood me up like this, I'm kind of in my squat position. So we're going to start hands and knees. All I'm going to have you guys do is rock back onto your heels. Okay. And what I want you to note is, what do you feel in the hips with this? Okay. I'm sitting back onto my heels. My knees are straight. It feels a little bit tight to me. And that's just, that's my anatomy. I feel it on the front side here. A lot of us will. And that's a variance that we can talk about later. A lot of us will feel some pinching there. Okay. So this is a narrow squat position. Doesn't feel great for me. I'll be honest. Not awful, but just not great. Now, if I widen my knees a little bit, but keep my ankles where they are. So now my knees are going out like this. If I start to sit back, that feels better. I don't feel that pinching in the front of my hip. It feels a little bit more fluid. So I'm sitting on hands and knees, sitting back. I don't feel that pinching kind of in that hip crease we were talking about. Now, if I go really wide, if I take my knees and I shove them out as far as I can, and I start sitting back, all the while keeping my feet together back here, again, doesn't feel great. The one that felt the best for me was in that kind of middle stance where my knees were just a little bit outside my shoulders, not super narrow, not super wide. So I want you guys to play around with that position here for a minute and just kind of rock in and out and see what feels the best. If I'm on hands and knees and I sit back narrow, does that feel good? Is it a little bit outside my shoulders, or is it super wide? And the answer is going to be different for all of us. Now, once you've found that stance, and you guys can play around with this later if you need more time. Once you sit back and you found that stance, I'm in that position now. This is my squat stance. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of press myself up here. I'm going to roll myself up, and now I'm in the bottom of my squat, and this is what feels really comfortable. Okay. Now, let's say I was a narrow person, and I said, I really feel good in the hips when I squat narrow. Sit back like this. Knees somewhat close, and then I just roll up. So now my feet and my knees are pretty close. Okay. And use that for all those positions. And then once you're standing, just look down, and then that's your squat stance. That is a good squat stance, at least from the hip perspective, of something that should be comfortable for you to hit depth. If you can sit back onto your heels in these positions without pain, without restrictions, that's a deep squat. That's deeper than you'll ever go in a squat. So that's the first way that we can assess this. The next way is a little bit tougher by yourself, but it can still be done. All you're going to do is lay on your back, and your knee is going to be bent here, and I'm just going to pull my knee towards my chest. And we're looking for the same concept here. When I bring it straight and I pull it straight back towards my chest, it doesn't feel great. It feels real pinchy on the front of my hip here. Now, if I take my knee out a little bit wider, just outside my shoulders, and I pull my knee back towards my chest, it feels a little bit better. And that's the same position that I found when I was on hands and knees. That's that kind of middle ground for me where I can really groove in and out of that, and it feels fine. Now, if you take your knee really far, so all the way out to the side here, and bring it back towards your chest, same thing. Doesn't feel great for me. Some of you guys it will. So that's just an easy way for you guys to kind of diagnose, how wide should my feet be? How wide should my knees be going out? How flared should I be? Like I was saying before, there might be some consideration for the perfect squat. A lot of us just aren't there yet. So find this position that feels good. We don't want to force bad positions. So if you're squatting and things don't feel right, don't force it. Find what feels good. Your body will tell you what feels right, and then just kind of build from there. And then we'll slowly work backwards. Now, we're going to do an assessment now on a couple of joints that are really important for hip mobility. And we've gone through this a lot. If you guys have been working with us, or if you've seen our videos for a while, So I'm going to touch on this because this is important stuff, but we're not going to dwell too long on this. So all I'm going to have you do is take a seat here, and we're going to look at hip mobility. Obviously, it's very important, regardless of your hip structure, regardless of your anatomy, to have good mobility through your hips. So we'll sit just like this. I'm going to have you let your feet kind of dangle if you can. And then we'll start with my left one. I'm going to keep the knee down, and then I'm going to rotate my leg just like so. Okay, then you can let it relax. One thing we want to watch is some of us will pass this test, and it'll be kind of a cheating test because we're going to hike our leg up and say, oh yeah, I got tons of range. Just keep your hand here so your knee doesn't come up, and we're just going to rotate the leg like so. Now, there's a couple of things that could be causing this. I know for a fact my left hip is pretty tight from just a mobility standpoint. The two options would be, do I have mobility here, or do I have strength or motor control or stability to get my leg up? It could be that I'm really tight here and I just can't work that range of motion. It also could be that the muscles on the outside of my hip, they're just not engaged or active enough to get me there. But use that as just an assessment, is do I have the range of motion? We can talk about what that means later if you guys have specific questions. So I'm just going to turn my leg here into external rotation. Do I have that position? Yes or no? For this one, I really don't have great range of motion there. On the right side, same deal. And I have a little bit more. So this one would be better off, but it's not perfect. A pass fail on this, like how do you know like it's far enough? We're looking for like 45 to 50 degrees. So kind of is, almost 5-degree angle. If you can get to roughly here, that's good enough. That'll work for our squat. The reason why this is important is as we start squatting down, my knees need to be out here. So that's that external rotation position we just tested. Okay. The next one, let me lower the camera so you guys can see this. This is a super important one. Next one we're going to assess is ankle range of motion. This is an easy one for you guys to do at home. I'll have you guys do this with your shoes off. So if you're wearing shoes, take them off. I'm going to leave mine on now just for the sake of time. And all you're going to do is you're going to take a knee just as I am. And we'll start relatively close to the wall here. I'm using the leg of the table. Use a doorway, use a wall. You can put a PVC pipe out. Any of those will work. Just something standing upright like this. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to keep my heel on the ground. And that's why it's important to be out of your shoes so you don't have any cheating. So I don't want my heel to come up like this. I'm going to keep it flat on the ground, and I'm going to try to touch my knee to the wall. Okay. I'm at about 2 inches right there. So if I pass that at 2 inches, then that's a passing on that one for now. Now I'm going to back it up. Okay. Now I'm at about, 4.5 to 5 inches. I'm going to repeat that test. Keep my heel down and try to touch the wall like so. I have decent range of motion. I can't get quite as far on this side. My other one's a little bit better. And a lot of you guys will say, well, this is really far. Like, there's no reason why I need this much ankle range of motion. For normal day-to-day life, I would probably agree with you. However, at the bottom of a squat, we do need a lot of dorsiflexion there. So you think about that bottom position here, my knees need to come forward for a lot of reasons. And that's why it's important to make sure we have that full range. So start, an inch or two off, try to touch it. Many of us can. We're going to back it up to 4.5 to 5 inches. If you can touch from here, then that's a passing test on this. You have, probably unbelievable ankle range of motion. If you're missing that, then we want to kind of find out where are we, or am I at 2 inches? Am I at 3 inches? The less, the closer I have to be to the wall to touch it, the worse my mobility is in my ankle. Probably more likely that lifters would be a good option for me, and I need to work through ankle mobility. Okay. So that's ankle mobility and its importance in the squat. Then the next one we're going to look at is hip range of motion and just your ability to bend your knee. So we're just going to find a table like this. You could do it on your bed. You can just kind of do it anywhere. And I'm up here high just so you guys can see it like from the right angle. All you're going to do is you're going to go on your back. You're going to bring your knees to your chest, and then you're going to let one leg fall. And what's that going to tell me is, do I have good range of motion through my knee? Can I bend my knee? Do I have flexibility through my quad? And then also, how tight are my hips on the front side? So it looks just like this. So for me, I have pretty good hip range of motion here because there's no space between my thigh and the table. Now, if you were pretty tight in the hip, oftentimes we'll see this position where there's a lot of space there between the leg and the table. Now, let's say that I was having some quad tightness and then I couldn't bend my knee well, which is obviously very important in the bottom of the squat. You would see this kind of position here where the knee stays straight. And if somebody told you, hey, relax your knee, I am relaxed. This is relaxed. So for me, I'm a little bit tight in the quads. I'm not able to ideally get to like a 90-degree position. I can't get that. So that would tell me that my hips are probably pretty good, but my quads are not. So I need to work on that. When you do that test, it's really important that the opposite leg that you're not testing, that you hold it close to your chest here. Okay. So that's just a quick summary. We assessed ankles, anterior chain, so quad length, anterior hip length, and then also what kind of rotation do we have in the hips. Now, when we're squatting, there's a couple of points of performance that we want to keep in mind that are really important for a lot of reasons. Not only for health, the nature of our office is we're a sports injury clinic. It's obviously really important for health, but also performance. The important things we want to think about is, and these are kind of non-negotiable to be honest with you, we want to make sure that our knees do not come inside of our feet, okay? Now, you don't have to go crazy and more is not better as far as shoving your knees out. We want to at least have our knees roughly on the outside of our foot. So we can talk about maybe your third or fourth toe. That's where we want our feet to be. And then anywhere outside of that is okay. Again, not stressing, not straining and going too wide, but not allowing our knees to come in is a non-negotiable 100%. The next thing we want to work on or focus on is keeping a neutral spine. So if we're squatting and the only way we can stabilize our spine is by arching our back like that, you see you have this big extension. That's not good either. What we want is what's called a neutral spine, where our spine stays relatively straight. So again, we'll get into that, but that has to occur. So when you guys are testing the squat at home, if you guys don't have that, we got to get back to the drawing board and figure out why that's going on. If you load a barbell on you, on your back in the front squat or even overhead, that's going to compound the issue and we're not going to have good integrity in our spine. So that's very important. The next one is we want to make sure when we're squatting, as we go down, we want to have control. So we don't want to bottom out in our squat. Now, if you're doing a 1-rep max, this changed a little bit and kind of, integrity and, technique, they get a little bit skewed in a 1-rep max. But for 99% of our squatting, we want to make sure that we go down slower than we come up. Okay. So what I mean by that is we're not crashing and bottoming out every time we squat. That's a really important component for ligament health, tendon health. Neurologically, for a lot of reasons, it's really important that we have that controlled descent. Now, on the ascent or the concentric portion of it, we want to come up fast. So as I'm squatting down, I have nice, good leverage, good control here. And then coming up, I'm strong, I'm coming up fast. So again, another non-negotiable is going down has to be slower than coming up for 99% of your squatting. The other one is when we come out of the hole, so we're in that bottom position, and this is especially important once things get heavy. We want to make sure that our knees we want to make sure that our shoulders and our hips rise at the same time. Let me see if I can lower this a little bit. Many of us have seen the people or even ourselves that when we squat and we get to this bottom position, we see this action happen where my hips shoot up, or we'll see where we're here and I immediately kind of arch up like that. We want to make sure that your hips and your shoulders rise at the same time. So as I'm coming down, my hips and shoulders rise at the same time. Those are the non-negotiables of squatting that we got to keep in mind. I have this amazing drawing that I created. Kind of shows you if we're back squatting or squatting in general. This dotted line here is the position of where the weight needs to be. Okay. So this is somebody's head. This is their feet, knees, hips. We want to make sure that that center of mass, if we have a barbell on our back, or even if we're overhead squatting, change it a little bit if we front squat, but for overhead squatting and back squatting should stay pretty similar to this. We want to make sure that that barbell or that weight distribution is in this dotted line here. You can see if you come down, it's really on my midfoot, and that's a really important concept. When we lose that, let's say we're missing ankle range of motion and I can't get in that good position, that's when we start seeing the hip shoot up. That's when we start seeing back pain. That's when we start seeing injuries kind of throughout the whole system. So as you're squatting, I want you to start filming yourself and paying attention to your bar path. Is this the bar path you're seeing? Now, if you're seeing the bar path go out here, that's not good. And then the same thing forward. We want to make sure that we're not losing that integrity of that bar path. So if you guys are squatting today or the next time you do, I want you to put the camera off to the side and then film yourself kind of working through that range and make sure we're maintaining that position. Okay, so that's a lot of the kind of mechanics of squatting. That's some of the baseline mobility. Now we're going to get into, do we have the strength to do it? Do we have adequate strength on both legs? That's really important. We start talking about like glute activation, hamstrings, quads, all that. So this is going to be probably a little bit funner section to go over. I'm going to have you grab some floor space. Like I said, I'll bring the camera back here. And we're going to start with an exercise that everybody has done before, and it's just a glute bridge. So we're going to go on our back. And one thing we want to think about is bringing our heels so they're almost underneath my knees. So we don't want to have our feet super far out here. We want to keep our heels, or just put your heels underneath your knees the best you can. And then all I'm going to have you do is you're going to stay in your back here, and I'm going to have you lift your hips off the ground. You don't have to go super high, just lift your hips off the ground. We're going to hang out there, and I just want to know what you're feeling. And take note of this, and if you have questions at the end, we can go over it. But keep your hips up in the air. What are you feeling? Are you feeling hamstrings? Are you feeling quads? Are you feeling glutes? Are you feeling low back? These are all indicators. What is my ability to drive my hips up? What is the ability of my my body to extend my hips? Okay, you can come on down. That's going to be easy for a lot of us. Here's where we start getting some really good information. Now I'm going to have you go one leg straight. So we're going to do a single leg bridge, and same deal. And this isn't hard from a strength standpoint for a lot of us that are active. Maybe some of us it is. But I'm going to have you lift your hips up into the air, and we're just going to hold that position there. And I want to know, what are you feeling? Are you shaking? Is this unstable? What muscles are engaged in that single leg bridge position? So leg straight, lift my hips up, and just hold it. Are you feeling glutes? You feeling low back? You feeling quads? You feeling hamstrings? And then we're going to switch sides and do the exact same thing. And as you guys are doing this, I want you to take note, what do you feel side to side? Hey, my left side feels stronger than my right side. I feel less stable on the right side. My right side, I feel glutes. My left side, I feel quads. What kind of issues are we having there? I want you to take note of that, write it down, and just kind of diagnose yourself. What's the issue going from side to side? Now, why does this matter? When I'm squatting, we do it in 2 feet. Doesn't mean we're getting equal activation or distribution of muscle engagement on both sides. If I'm really firing well on the right side with my glutes, obviously those are important, but I'm not firing well on the left side, what does that look like in a squat? It could be many things. You could see a hip shift. You could see decreased strength. You could see injury. You could see like kind of funky mechanics where your feet are kind of helicoptered out of there. So that's a really important test to figure out side to side, am I getting equal activation? Am I having equal strength? So it's just a single leg bridge. And I want you to pay attention. What am I feeling side to side? Now, similar to that, and a little bit more direct, let me move the camera. We're going to try a single leg squat. I'm not going to have you guys do pistols. I want you to find a high chair. I have a bench, like a bench press here in the office. Find a high chair, find a couch, find your bed, find something. And all we're going to do is we're going to start with our legs back pretty close to the bench or whatever you're using. I don't want you guys to be too far out because that can be a little bit sketchy on the way down. We're going to start pretty close here, and we're just going to balance on one leg. That's our starting point. And I'm just going to try to take a seat and then stand up and do that maybe 5 times. Okay, and then you'll switch legs. I'm kind of just watching you guys, so go ahead and try those out. And getting back to those points of performance, I want you guys thinking about, is my knee caving in? Is it caving in on the left side more than it is on the right side, vice versa? Is my spine able to stay straight? What muscles am I engaging? Do I feel all quads on the left? Do I feel mostly glutes on the right? These kind of things are easy to assess. So maybe knock out 5 of those. The other thing too that maybe is just more obvious, what side's harder? Am I stronger on the right? Do I just feel more confident? Do I have better balance? Am I better coming out of the hole on the right than I am the left? Okay, that looks good for most of you guys, and we'll kind of chat here in a minute or two. And I'll be honest with you, if you're struggling with that, if you're like, hey, on that bridge, I only felt hamstrings, or I only felt glutes, or I only felt quads, the test is the rest, what's the word? That's how you fix it. Okay. So if you're having problems in that bridge position and you're like, hey, I want to get way better, because that's essentially this position. I'm at the bottom of my squat. I want to get way better of coming out of the hole using my glutes. Spend time in that bridge, dial in that left side, make sure that you're getting equal activation of glutes, left side versus right side. And same thing with the single leg squat. If you're somebody that struggles with this position when they're squatting, or they're catching a split jerk or overhead squatting, or just, hey, I just don't squat well, spend some time in that single leg squat. It's nice and high. I'm not going super deep, so it's not dangerous. And I'm just learning how to drive out of that hole using my glutes. All right, so I'm going to open this up for questions. Those are some just kind of low-level exercises we can work on, and just some cues that are really important from a performance standpoint. They get overlooked, and we wanted to give you some individualized understanding of your squat. It's different for everybody, so it's not a one-size-fits-all, and that's why it's important to spend time in that position and then figuring out, where are my limitations, what do I need to work on? So I'm going to open it up. If you guys are going to talk, just make sure you unmute yourself. That way I can hear you. Any questions?
Hey, Aaron, it's Ed Malinowski, man. How are you?
Hey, Ed. Good to see you, man.
Hey, good to see you too. Hey, buddy. So, you know me, I'm that guy that has a problem with his T-spine, right? And I've got a lot of problems kind of keeping my elbows in line when I back squat and that sort of thing. Can you touch on a little bit of that for a group, please?
Yeah, let me grab a PVC pipe. Yes, so Ed's got a great question. He's saying, look, I think my lower body maybe is okay. A lot of my issues with back squatting are coming upstream. And that's a super valid question. Probably need to do another workshop to assess the upper body. The reason why this matters, what he's saying is his T-spine is a little bit tight. So if I put this barbell on my back here, a couple things are going to happen. If you're missing T-spine extension, so your mid to upper back's ability to extend like that, what we're going to do is we're going to compensate by extending the low back. Ed, have you ever had low back pain with squatting?
I have in the past. I actually had a surgery in my late 20s, but honestly, like now it's not as bad, right? So primarily my problem is T-spine.
Yeah. So if we're missing that T-spine mobility, we're going to compensate by doing a couple of things. We're either going to have to really change our shoulder position, where I have to really we call this externally rotate and rotate our shoulders here, or we're going to arch our back a lot in the low back to make up for that. So we have to have T-spine position, range of motion, especially in a front squat. I would say probably even more so to keep us upright. Now, I know with Ed, we have some issues in external rotation mobility, right, Ed? Yeah. So if you're missing this position, and the reason why we didn't go over this specifically is because we weren't talking just back squat today, because I wanted to talk about any squat in general. But if we're back squatting or front squatting, we need this position here where we have this torque or this external rotation position. If we're missing that, we'll see the shoulders kind of dump forward like that. And you can see my right shoulder, it's kind of dumping forward. So if we're missing that external rotation here, we're going to kind of dump forward. So let's say you're Ed and you're like, hey, I don't have good shoulder range of motion. It doesn't feel comfortable to get into this position. Make sure you're doing some shoulder mobility drills before squatting. It seems counterintuitive. It seems like, wow, I would only do that before I bench or I would press overhead. But make sure we're doing any type of stretching we do for external rotation. Maybe you're doing this stretch. Honestly, there's a million, so it doesn't really matter all that much. But if you're doing any type of stretching to improve your shoulder range of motion, make sure you do it before you squat, because that's a really tough shoulder position if you don't have that range. So, Ed, does that answer your question?
It does, Aaron. And you know, truth be told, if I'm confessing here, I'm the guy that runs right into getting the glutes activated before I do all the stuff I'm supposed to, right? So yeah, I mean, honestly, but that's something I just got to remind myself on. So thanks, Aaron. I appreciate it. Yeah, we already knew that anyways. You didn't tell on yourself. Any other questions?
Hi, Aaron.
Hey, Krista.
So in the beginning, the first thing that you had us do for like a minute, I noticed like my like pinky toes and like the fourth toe, like those were definitely like flared up. Like I could not get my whole foot flat.
Okay.
So what does that kind of indicate?
Sure. It could be a lot of things, to be honest with you. When we did the ankle assessment, did you have good range of motion?
On the one side, my left is actually better than my right. I don't know like the exact inches. I'd have to measure it on the ground, but the further I went out, obviously the more difficult it was, but it wasn't as bad as I would have thought given I mean, but you'd have to kind of look at it and see, because I'm not sure like where it gets to the point where it's impossible for like anybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if you could put your fist between your toe, your big toe and the wall, that's roughly 4 inches. If you can do
Okay.
that, then that's probably good enough. Let's say
Okay.
you can do that on both sides, then it's probably not an ankle mobility issue. Then we want to look upstream. Do we have hip range of motion issues? Do I have just strength in the hips to control that? If my pinky toes, my like lateral toes are coming up, maybe it's because I'm not able to control that motion through my hips to keep myself nice, engaged, and wide. If my knees kind of, I don't want to say collapse, but if everything starts rotating in, if you look at my hands here, if everything starts rotating in, these kind of come up. You can see my pinky here. So that's the position we want to work on. So the more external rotation we can create, the more torque we can create like that, the more that your feet are going to stay flat.
Right. Okay.
So to answer your question, assess your ankles, see if you have enough position, give me at least 4 inches at the bottom position of a squat. If that's really good, go upstream to your hips. Do you have enough range of motion there to hang out there? And then we can kind of figure out in the office, whether it's a mobility or stability issue. But you'll know it'll kind of feel tight, or it'll feel like, hey, I just don't have the strength.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Hey, Aaron, James here.
Hey, James.
Hey, so we've worked before on my ankle mobility. My left ankle I broke several times through wrestling and military, and I just have an extraordinarily limited ankle dorsiflexion, like an inch and a half on my left side. So when I don't wear lifters, I have like a lateral hip shift where my whole hips shift to my right side. That's where I have more mobility. Other than just wearing lifters and going through a couple of the mobility drills we've done with like banded distraction, is there anything you can recommend on that?
Yeah, that's a tough one, James, and that's because you're working against anatomy limitations where some people just have tight tissues. You have like some actual structural issues from your history, so you can't always work around that. Ankles are slow progressing as far as improving your range of motion there. The ankle protocols are important. I would make that, if that's your goal to be able to squat without lifters, make that your job. Every day I work on my ankle mobility. I know a lot of us, it's like, hey, I just do it when I squat or if I run. Make it a daily habit. That's the only way those tissues adapt. They don't just change overnight. Your tissues have to go through like a remodeling process for them to learn that new range of motion. And that just takes time, which is a good thing because that means that, bad patterns aren't developed overnight either, but it just takes time to improve that. I would say for you, wearing lifters and then going into, let me see if I can show you here on the ground. So if I'm in lifters here, and if I start squatting, I want to start thinking about really driving my knees forward, okay? So I have can you see this, James? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, so as I'm squatting, I want to really think about bringing my shin forward. Sometimes just that time under tension can regroove this pattern. Do your ankle mobility, but when I'm doing air squats, I'm really focusing on driving my shin forward and my knee forward. That's going to regroove that pattern. It's one thing to be able to do mobility drills on the wall for your ankle. It's another thing to actually apply it to your squat. So just making dorsiflexion or ankle range of motion a priority in your squat can have a big turnover. Usually when we squat, it's just like, hey, I'm just thinking about going up and down. Make ankle range of motion your priority when you're squatting, just forcing that, driving that adaptation.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Justin Scott, do you have a question? He does not. Okay. All right, guys. Well, if you don't have any questions, hopefully that was helpful. If you have specific questions based on your assessment, shoot me an email, shoot me, a message. We're still here in the office, obviously. We can assess your movement. The challenges of doing this virtually is obviously I can't see your movement 100%, but hopefully this gave you a diagnostic like, hey, my ankles aren't great, like, James just said, or I know my T-spine is a little stiff and I need to improve my shoulder range of motion as I'm squatting. Those things are really important to identify. If you have specific questions, just let us know. We'll try to answer as best we can. Maybe we can send you a video or, even do like a virtual consult. I can take you through some tests to figure out specifically what's going on. Okay, guys. Thanks for everything.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Sure.
Bye now.
Okay.
Have a good one.
Thank you, Aaron.
You're welcome, guys. Thanks for joining.
And thank you. Super helpful.
Thanks.
Thank you.
See you, Paul.
All right. See you guys.